We talking about practice. Not a game, not a game. We talking about practice.
Welcome everyone to the After Practice Podcast. I'm your host, Lake Lewis. As always, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to check me out. You can follow me on social media on Twitter at Lake Lewis. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Lake Lewis Jr. And then you can also find some of my work and some of the work of some of my colleagues on sportsjourney.com. Sports Journey does have a social media. Social media on Twitter for Sports Journey is Sports Journey. On Instagram and Facebook, it's Sports Journey.com. So again, please check out the outlet and see some great works from some of my other colleagues out there who are really giving you some great content. Today, we're going to break down 5 questions that I think need answers for the Washington football team heading into training camp. Those 5 questions are things that fans alike have talked about. I think that there are 5 things that are really important for this team to have success and keep the momentum going, building off of their 2020 season where they won the NFC East. A lot of people were saying, this team won the NFC East at 7-9. So, hey, they didn't have a great record. They didn't. But I think the eye test proved that this was a young ascending team. This was a team that had a lot of, pieces to put, around and build upon. They have a great young defense. And I know I use that word great loosely at times, but I think this defense really can be great. I think they can be elite. And that's actually one of my, 5 questions that I think needs an answer for. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. For me, the number 5 question that I think needs an answer is, what are they going to do with Landon Collins? We're talking about a 2-time Pro Bowl safety that, came over from the New York Giants as a free agent. The team gave him $84 million over a 6-year deal. $44 million of that money was guaranteed. He has a dead cap hit of $29 million this year. So I think it's safe to say that this team's not releasing Landon Collins. They have to either try to trade him. If they don't see him being in their long-term plans, they're going to have to try to trade him. The problem is, how do you trade a safety coming off of, his first season here in Washington? It was a good year, but it wasn't Pro Bowl caliber by any means. And then you go out the next year, you're playing okay, you are, but you rupture your Achilles. So you think of that injury. I'm a guy that's had that injury, and it still has, hobbled me for almost 4 years now. And I've gone through rehab and all kinds of things, but I'm not even a pro athlete, nowhere close to it. Landon Collins is a pro athlete. You would think that he could come back from this. We've seen in basketball, guys like Kevin Durant come back from this injury. Hopefully Klay Thompson comes back from that injury. But football's a little different sport. You're wearing cleats, you're on grass, you're on multi surfaces, a lot of cutting, a lot of backpedaling. It's just a lot of things going on out there. You're tackling, you can get kicked in it. So it's going to be interesting to see how Landon Collins can come back. The reason why I say that they're going to have to answer that question is because you had a young guy last year in Cam Curl who played really well as a rookie, so much so that I think he entrenched himself there. He endeared himself to the fans, to the coaches, to his teammates, and I think he's entrenched. I really do. I know competition brings out the best in everyone, but how can you not have Cam Curl as your starting strong safety after the rookie campaign that he had last year? That's going to be a question that we're going to have to look at during training camp, these early days. Training camp starts in less than 2 weeks, July 27th through the 31st in Richmond, Virginia. If you're in Richmond, I look forward to seeing you when I come down. But nevertheless, that's going to be a question that we're going to have to get a definitive answer for. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with Landon Collins, who still is only, 26 years old. He's a young player. He'll be 27 during the season. A very young player. It'll be a good problem to see if maybe he can ascend and elevate his game even higher. And then you figure out what you're going to do with Cam Curl, what you're going to do with Bobby McCain, who I think is going to play more safety than corner for this Washington defense. So that's question number 5. Question number 4 for the Washington football team. To me, is another question that we have to see play out. It's the offensive line. Who's going to emerge as the starting five for the Washington football team on their offensive line? Naturally, one of the big moves that was made this offseason was the release of longtime veteran Morgan Moses. Morgan's my dude. He's a friend of mine, so I was saddened to see that, he had to move on. But nevertheless, Morgan's made, some good money here, and he's going to make good money for the New York Jets. So continued success to him. But this team made a hard decision, and this was a decision that, although Morgan was a friend of mine, when you sit back and look at it, it actually makes sense. They were a team that, they have so many young players. We haven't talked about the defense, which we're going to, but they have so many players that they're going to have to get under contract that are going to be due for paydays. And, you have to find other players on the roster who are getting older, who, maybe you can move. Maybe you can save some salary cap space. And Morgan had a big cap hit. So they save money. They go out and they draft, Sam Cosmi from Texas in the second round with the hopes that maybe he can be, an opening day starter at right tackle. But what happens is we see that there's some other veterans on this roster that are capable. And for me, Cornelius Lucas, who played well on the left side last year, I think he's going to be your opening day right tackle. That's just my assessment and my opinion. Things can change naturally throughout training camp and preseason. But I think for Washington, they have to identify who first and foremost are their tackles. I think Charles Leno, bringing him over from the Bears, I think that was a big move for this team, and I think it's going to stabilize that left tackle position. I think he's your opening day left tackle. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But then on the other side, will it be, Cornelius Lucas? Maybe Sadiq Charles gets a look at that. Sam Cosmi. There's going to be a lot of interchangeable parts, and it's going to be important to find that tackle that's going to be next to all-pro Brandon Sheriff at right guard. Obviously, in the middle, Chase Roulier should be your opening day center. And then, when you get over to the left guard spot, there are several different players that have an opportunity to man that void. So it's going to be interesting to see how this offensive line, we know in a Ron Rivera system, offensively, with Scott Turner as their, offensive coordinator, they do want to run the football. They do want to have, multifaceted type players. You bring in Curtis Samuels from Carolina, who both those coaches are familiar with. He's a guy that can move all over the field and do different things. So they want to have guys that they can move out, spread out wide. Obviously at running back, when you think of Gibson at running back, he was a wide receiver in college. So, you need all these different pieces to work, but more importantly, the offensive line sets the tone for everything. So question number 4 is who's going to emerge along the Washington football team offensive line. Question number 3, coming right up, and we're going to keep it going. We're going to stay on the offensive side of the ball. And for me, that question is who emerges as the second, focal point on offense for the Washington football team. Last year, I think you have to say it was Logan Thomas, had a really, really good campaign as a true full-time starter at tight end. He had 82 catches, and I don't know if he's going to have 82 catches this year, not because he's not good and he won't be better, because I think both those things he will be. I just think that there's more offensive pieces around now, so maybe his numbers may take a little bit of a dip because other guys' numbers are going to ascend a little higher. Also, he may get more touchdowns in the red zone because I think the offense will be more capable of moving the ball, not just in between the 20s, but outside of the 20s. So I think you're going to see that quite a bit now. So for me, this year, 2021-22 season, who's going to emerge and give Terry McLaurin some help on offense to take pressure off of him? We saw defenses ganging up on Terry McLaurin last year. We saw defenses pretty much, covering him high. So he couldn't get beyond anyone. They boxed him in. And a lot of times on the other side of the field, they had receivers who could make a play here or there, but it wasn't consistent. That's where Curtis Samuel comes in. That's where hopefully a draft pick like a De'Ami Brown from North Carolina can stretch the field, and he's a really good deep ball receiver, can track the ball well. Maybe he can do that for this offense. I personally think the number 2 guy in this offense has to be their starting running back. It has to be Antonio Gibson. And I think Antonio Gibson was on his way last year. You started to see him week after week get better and better and better. I remember his kind of like unveiling against the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving. You know, we saw him make some really big runs for them. And then obviously he had an injury that, you know, I don't want to say it hampered him and slowed him down, but, you know, you play with turf toe. That's a tough injury to play with. So if he's healthy this year, he'll be able to do some really dynamic things. You know, again, if he's healthy, I think he's the number 2 guy on this offense. Logan Thomas will be the number 3 guy. Curtis Samuel could be a number 3 guy. There's just more opportunities now, more weapons out on the field for the Washington football team's offense. So that's question number 3. Who's going to emerge on offense as a number 2 viable option, viable threat to help push this offense over the top? Okay? Could be the quarterback. We haven't talked about him. You know, we're going to talk about him shortly because that's a big question, of course. So now, number 2, it has to be the defense. Can this defense become an elite unit? They were really good last year. There were times where they were exploited in certain areas in the middle of the field. They seem to have addressed that. They hope they've addressed that by drafting Jamin Davis, a freak linebacker out of Kentucky, really athletic, smart young player. I think that they look at him to be, you know, a linchpin for them, literally, for the next decade or so in the middle, manning the middle. Ron Rivera has had great success with middle linebackers. You know, you look at Luke Kuechly, you look at Thomas Davis from his days in Carolina. He's had some guys that have really excelled. And if he can get that kind of production from Jamin Davis in the middle of this defense, then it's you know, all full-blown go ahead, if that's how you want to say it. I may have butchered that. But this team is going to be that much better. You know, they brought in William Jackson, a really good cover corner. They brought him over from Cincinnati via free agency. So now he's going to, in retrospect, be replacing Ronald Darby. And to me, that's an upgrade over Ronald Darby. No offense to Ronald Darby, played well last year and got a nice contract from the Denver Broncos. But William Jackson's really good. And I think fans are going to be, you know, pleasantly, you know, surprised when they see how good he can even be, you know, more of a player, you know, with this Washington defense. You think of everything that they have in place. You know, you bring back Matt Ioannidis, who basically was injured in the first game last year against the Eagles. You bring him back now to go along that stout defensive line. There's really, when you look at it on paper, I don't see any holes on this defense. You know, I think Cole Holcomb and John Bostic would be that much better being able to play natural linebacker positions, you know, and not have to cover guys at times. And Jamin Davis is actually a really good cover guy. So everything is aligning itself for Chase Young, Montez Sweat to come around the edges, for the, you know, for Tim Settle, for Deron Payne, John Allen, Matt Ioannidis to get push up the middle on defense. And then in the back, you know, back half of the defense for William Jackson, for Kendall Fuller, for Jimmy Moreland. Don't forget about the name Benji St. Juste. Benjamin St. Juste, I think at some point this year is going to start at corner opposite William Jackson. That's my prediction. You heard it here first. They've got a lot of things there. And then, of course, in the backside of the defense, the very last stop on defense at the safety positions, Cam Curl, you know, Jeremy Reeves is there. Bobby McCain, I think, will play a lot of safety this year. You know, he's a really good player. They brought him from Miami. You know, they have a lot of pieces back there. You know, Landon Collins, of course. So it's going to be interesting to see if this defense can go from good to great. If they can get to that elite great status, I think it's going to be a really fun, interesting season for the Washington football team. But they're going to go as far as their defense takes them. I think the offense will be much improved, but the defense, though, will have to be the catalyst for this team to have sustained success and continue their upward trajectory from where they were last year in the NFC East. Number 1, I think everyone knows what number 1 is. I mean, if you don't know what the number 1 storyline for the Washington football team on the field, we're not talking about name changes and stadiums and owners, you know, switching and none of that stuff. We're talking about the X's and O's on the field in this podcast today. And for me, without question, the number 1 question that needs an answer is who's going to be their quarterback. I think most people might say when I said that, come on, Lake, we know it's Ryan Fitzpatrick. Do we? Because I'm telling you, in minicamp, I saw Taylor Heineke look pretty good. I did. It's minicamp. Yes, I know they didn't have pads on. Defense can't really come hit you or do anything. I get that. But just from the eye test, guys, I'm telling you, Taylor Heineke made some throws that were really impressive. And he showed mobility that, let's face it, Ryan Fitzpatrick doesn't have compared to him. So I think if they have a legitimate quarterback competition, may the best man win. Yes, if you gave me that truth serum, which I always mention in my podcast, I would probably say that Fitzpatrick wins out. But if he doesn't, and that's because he was being outplayed by Taylor Heineke, or maybe perhaps Kyle Allen, he has to put his name in there as well because he did have a start last year for this team before he was injured in the Rams game. If you really look at this, though, whoever wins the quarterback job played so well in training camp and preseason that there's no question that they're the guy. And that's the guy you want, not just for to start the season, but that's the guy you're hoping and praying is there for 17 games and some playoff games because you want to win your division. So who's going to be the quarterback for the Washington football team, amongst those three? Early money says it's Ryan Fitzpatrick. And that's fine because they brought him in to be the guy. Ron Rivera himself said that he wants, Kyle Allen, he wants Taylor Heineke, especially Taylor Heineke, to push Ryan Fitzpatrick. But if he pushes him too much, we might have an issue here, a quarterback situation brewing. But I know that they'll put it to bed. They're going to have their guy from week one be in there, and that's it. So that's what they're going to need if they're going to try to get back to the playoffs and if they're going to try to do something that no NFC East team has done over the past previous, 16 seasons, and that's win back-to-back NFC East championships, divisional crowns. So Washington has their work cut out for them. I think they're capable of doing all of the above. I'm really excited about this young football team so much that I predict right now I think they're going to break that 16-season curse. I think they're going to win the division. I really, really feel strongly about that. I don't think it's going to be easy. I don't think it's a slam dunk. They're a landslide to do it. But I think that they have enough talent and enough hunger with these young players to get it done. I think that they're going to win the NFC East this year. I'm not going to give you my win prediction because, let's face it, that would ruin another pod. So we're going to give you that. So remember, folks, as always, check me out on social media, on Twitter at Lake Lewis, on Instagram and Facebook at Lake Lewis Jr. Check us out on sportsjourney.com and on our social media apps on Sports Journey at sportsjourney.com. You can also subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. You name your platform, it's on there. And then, of course, you can watch this via YouTube. So, as always, I appreciate you taking time out to listen to me, to watch me. Hopefully you walk away from every podcast feeling more informed about things about your favorite team that maybe you didn't know beforehand. So as always, have a good one. Take care. Be safe.